Now for today's program. Back in June, you may have read or heard about a highly unusual and somewhat controversial warning from NASA about our planet, that it would be subjected to devastating solar flares from a massive once-in-a-generation space storm sometime around the year 2013, or to be more precise, just a little more than 2 years from now, we could expect this huge solar event to take place. So serious were NASA's warnings that they actually convened a space weather conference in our nation's capital to discuss the necessary precautions that would be required in order to step up national security and emergency action in anticipation of a catastrophic event from space. In their published statement, NASA indicated that we should expect that an event of this magnitude would cause widespread power blackouts and the long-term loss of critical satellite communications, which would include the internet and cell phones. Senior space agency scientists are now claiming that the Earth will be hit by unprecedented levels of magnetic energy from flares that will be generated by an active sun that is awakening from a deep slumber. As a matter of fact, the director of NASA's Heliophysics Division, Dr. Richard Fisher, states in an interview with the Daily Telegraph that NASA knows it is coming to Earth, that we can't say how bad it is going to be, but we do know that it is going to cause lots of problems here on Earth. So as far as the general public is concerned, we know the following about this rather ambiguous warning from the space agency. Number one, something that will be approaching from the general direction of the sun and that contains unprecedented amounts of magnetic energy is going to hit the Earth sometime in 2012 or the following year. Number two, this solar event, as NASA calls it, will damage or destroy satellite communications across the globe, causing widespread blackouts resulting in the loss of the internet, cell phones, and an array of electronic devices for an undetermined amount of time. Number three, the government is meeting to discuss ways to deal with the devastation that is expected to occur with this solar event, setting up national security and dealing with emergency response systems. Number four, it's uncertain as to the extent of damage that this event will incur on the Earth, yet nevertheless, it is going to happen, and we should prepare ourselves now. So this is what we know. But does any of us really understand what's happening? And should we adhere to these warnings or maybe just take it with a grain of salt? Is NASA telling us the truth or rather keeping us in the dark about the real facts and what's actually going to happen in the days and months ahead? Our guest on today's segment, Nancy Lader, is no stranger to our show. She has been with us here a number of times and is well known by many across the internet, including her appearances on the nationally syndicated Coast to Coast and a host of local radio programs. She has devoted her time and energy to educating the public on ways to survive catastrophic events, in particular those events created by what is referred to as a cosmic presence of considerable magnitude that is believed to be present within our solar system today, and we'll get into the meaning of this interpretation of what I'm referring to here on the program today. So I would now like to welcome back to our show and to our webcast the mistress of Zeta Talk, Miss Nancy Lader. Hi, Nancy.
Oh, I'm so pleased to be back, and of course, it's not the sun, it's Planet X, Nibiru, Wormwood, the Great Destroyer, whatever name you want to call it. They know that our magnetosphere is already being engaged by this approaching planet, which is coming outbound from the sun, and it's slightly closer to the sun than Venus at present, but coming outbound, and it's engaging our magnetosphere since the middle of 2009, we've had this twisting and turning of our magnetosphere being simulated by the ACE satellite, which hangs up there. And sometimes our south pole disappears. Sometimes the flow, instead of going north and coming around to the south of Earth, it'll come out of the North Pole and plunge directly south, and then the return to the South Pole comes from the nethers up above, down and curves into. It's just wacky. And what's causing this is Planet X, because its magnetosphere is larger than ours. It is 4 times as the diameter of Earth, 23 times the mass, and naturally it's a magnetic bully and it wins. And as it approaches us, we're like a little magnet flipping around trying to figure out how to position ourselves so that because magnets do this. You can't get the North Poles to touch, for instance. Sometimes we lean, currently we're having some leaning of our North Pole too far to the south, too far to the sun, rather, and causing heat waves across our entire northern hemisphere. Russia is just baking. And then it'll sometimes flop over too far to the left, falling on its side. So people in the northern latitudes say that the sunrise and sunset is way too far north. And other times our Earth wobble is lurching more violently, causing the plate movement and more increasing earthquakes, which even with the USGS cover-up is still apparent to people on the charts when they run statistics. And they're dropping those earthquakes from the databases. And they're dumbing down the Richter so they don't tell you the truth.
Would you say that this is some sort of like a scaremongering type of thing by NASA? Because we know that what they're telling us is, well, that's going to be very disturbing to a lot of people who pay attention to these reports. But do those who follow these solar trends and these warnings coming from scientists, it seems a little bit confusing and misleading, to us particularly, because, for a lot of people, we know what's going on out there. But for others, and there's a lot more of those others out there, they don't know what's going on. So this is really confusing to them.
Right. Actually, here's what NASA is trying to do. They're trying to avoid admitting that Planet X is in our inner solar system. We tracked it in 2003 from the night sky, according to the zeta coordinates, the right angle and declination. And it's showing up on SOHO and in the form of a winged globe or a red cross, and the dust clouds and moon swirls, spotches are showing up. And they try to edit it out, and they can't. They considered taking SOHO down and decided just to ignore it instead. You can see the edit lines. They are desperately trying to avoid saying there's a planet interloper in our inner solar system approaching us, and we've been lying to you all this time, because they would have, they're under orders by their bosses to keep the cover-up going. The very wealthy, the politically powerful, and the like, known as the elite or the establishment, a general term, do not want the common man to know, because they don't want your messy panic. They don't want your demands. They don't want you saying, okay, if you've got a bunker all stocked up, where's my bed? And the like. They don't want you rioting and trying to overtake the military. They want everything calm until the last minute. Then they'll run to their bunkers and be safe. And this includes the elite, the head hierarchy at NASA. So what are they doing? At first they said, well, we know it's coming. What are we going to do? Well, let's blame global warming for all the weather changes that might happen. Let's blame the sun for any magnetic effects that might happen. And we'll blame asteroid swarms. If they see the moon swirls, they'll say, oh, it's asteroid swarms. I mean, these moons show up on the stereo ahead and behind satellites, and people have, and the Internet is abuzz with discussion about what is this stuff. And people really do not believe NASA if they have enough knowledge and are informed about what the rays coming from the sun are. They recognize that they're being spoon-fed, nonsense. And
well, here's what's really perplexing about what's going on with NASA, because they seem to be, in the last few years, they've really been wavering on this solar maximum and solar minimum stuff that's coming from these people. Like in 2006, for instance, They were telling us to expect a strong cycle in which the northern lights would be visible as far south as Rome, they were saying. Then during the past couple of years, in which little or no sunspot activity occurred, they told us to expect one of the weakest cycles since 1928. And so now, in the past couple of months, in which the sun has awakened from its slumber, the folks over there at NASA are suddenly worried about this catastrophic solar storm hitting the Earth in the next couple of years. Now, Nancy, given this unreliability of the NASA team to provide an accurate prediction of future solar events, how much credence should we really place in their lasting warning of a planetary disaster from a massive solar flare in the next few years? Is there a lot of credence in this?
No, none. And what you should do is listen to Zeta Talk, who is telling you what's going to happen and where it's coming from, because we are having electromagnetic disturbances. Air France 447, for instance, went down exactly over the Atlantic Rift, which is a surface magnet, because all of its electrical systems failed. They know that because a transmission came just ahead of when it went into the water, and they never will recover the black box. But and there's been electromagnetically driven trains, that have gone awry and just suddenly surged and flown off the tracks. Airplanes are having a lot of problems. GPS is not working right, etc., and their compasses are totally unreliable. The compass is pointing oddly, way too far to the west, not north. And so all of this has been predicted and explained by Zeta Talk all along, and we're going to continue to have that and blackouts because our whole grid system is designed to shut down if there's a surge or a brownout, and this is protection to keep the equipment from breaking. And dams. We've had transformers blow up in dams. There was a big one in Russia, Sasquatch, something like that. I can't pronounce it. Another one in Brazil just shut down. There was no reason for this, or the transformer blew up because it was rushed forward to speed up too, and fried everything, exploded everything. So these are electromagnetic effects, and they know, NASA and the government, that this is going to happen, and they're trying to say to people, get ready for this, but it's the sun, so that when it happens, people will say, oh, it's the sun. I mean, they're desperate in trying to make sure that you don't realize it. Now, we're seeing Planet X at times. It's 4 times the diameter of Venus and a little further away, so it's small relatively, and it's covered with a dust cloud, but every once in a while there's a glint of sunlight and people see 2 suns rising or setting and the like. So and the moon swirls sometimes funnel light in such a way that there's a bunch of little light orbs around the sun that people can get. They see it naked eye, they make videos and photos. So it is visible at times, but it always can be explained away. Oh, it's an atmospheric effect, or maybe you saw a sundog, or, they can always poo-poo it. But when it becomes visible in the sky without question, that's going to be very close to the last weeks. And therefore, they think that they can ride this all the way until they're within a couple of months of the pole shift and then run for their bunkers and to heck with you, the taxpayer. So you're mentioning some examples of how absurd NASA's gotten. They had a recent one within this last month that was a little bitty solar flare, a coronal mass ejection, CME. It was a C3. C's are the tiny ones.
Yeah, was that the one on August, was either August 3rd or August 10th? I think there was 2 of them, wasn't there?
Yeah, it wasn't long ago. And they made a huge deal out of this. They got on the media and said, wow, and that was supposed to hit on the 4th or the 5th, I think it was.
Now, is that the one they were going to refer to as the solar tsunami?
Yes, that was the one in the media, solar tsunami. This is nothing. It's like driving 5 miles an hour down the road and saying, well, the crash is going to be horrible, I mean, X-class flares. I have a photo of an X-class from year 2000 when we had the last maximum, and that was like, whoa. I'm throwing this up compared to what NASA was presenting on August 1st, saying here it comes. It's like you can't even find the stupid C3 flare. So why were they doing this? Because on July 31st, 2 days ahead or 1 day ahead, There was something that happened on the magnetosphere that's simulating, in which our part of the bow shock, that's the part that faces the sun, was deforming, melting, and going away. And they knew that something new and different was coming our way from the influence of Planet X on the magnetosphere. So they quickly jumped in on the very next day, August 1st, and said, this tsunami is going to hit. But it takes 2 days, everyone knows, for something coming from the sun to hit Earth.
Right.
So they said, it'll be around the 3rd. And then they said, no, maybe the 4th, maybe the 5th. And whatever we did have, which was nothing. We had some auroras, that showed up.
Right.
And this is like totally normal for any kind of a solar flare to have auroras, show up. But we didn't have blackouts. We didn't have airplanes going down. We didn't have satellite failure. We didn't have some people were even saying we're going to have earthquakes, trying to relate earthquakes to the sun, which has never been the case. Earthquakes are not caused by solar activity. No. But they're trying to relate everything caused by Planet X. They're trying to somehow, in the public mind, tie to activity in the sun. And the only reason they get the media is because the media is controlled by the powers that be, the elite, and they're all doing this cover-up scheme.
Would you say that NASA's sort of hanging in the wind these days, considering the fact they can't come out with an accurate report?
Yeah, and they even contradict themselves. There was another one, G1.9, which was something that just hit the media too recently, within I think the last week or so, about a week ago, and this is supposedly, it's a complete fraud. It doesn't even exist according to the Zetas, but they cooked this up as another way of explaining if blaming the sun did not work because the sun was so sleepy. We had no sunspots for like 260 days. It was supposed to be, the solar cycle to beat all solar cycles, and then the sun went to sleep and wasn't cooperating. And it's kind of hard to lie about this entirely because they have so many, the solar weather coming in. There's so many measurements that people can get their hands on, and amateurs can look at the sun and see the sunspots and stuff. So you can only lie so much. So it wasn't cooperating. So they cooked a deal up with Spanish astronomers to say that they had discovered a body, and there's a dwarf brown star, a brown dwarf. And the pictures that they showed had, like red flares on either side, which is what Nibiru looks like when it comes inbound. When it becomes visible, it'll look like a winged globe, as the ancients depicted, and that's what it looked like in 2003 when we were still able to get photos of it in the night sky. It had things coming out like a double helix swirling off either side. So, they tried to make it look like this in pictures and said it swings close to the solar system, every once in a while, and it will have like a magnetic or gravity, and then NASA was going to pretend to argue with these people and say, there's no evidence of that, and then finally accept that maybe it really was there, and then this would be the explanation for all kinds of weird stuff happening on Earth. Well, they contradicted themselves. There's an article in 2008 when this was first talked about, the Chandra, I think, probe or something had discovered it supposedly, and NASA's talking about it like, here it is, we discovered it, it's our probe, discovered it. And then in 2010 they start talking about these Spanish people are doing a hoax. At the very end they said, it's a hoax. But they hadn't said that 2 years earlier. They adopted it. So they're showing their game plan. They're speaking out both sides of their mouths. They're contradicting themselves and getting kind of sloppy at it lately, too.
Well, how much longer can these scientists go on with this charade?
Well, according to the Zetas, they're going to go on until the last minute. And you will never get the truth from NASA, basically. They will lie up until, even when there's something blazing in the sky, a second sun, and you see the moon swirls flying all over, and we're having huge, earthquakes all over the world, and we're swinging in our wobble from side to side, and the sun is all over the sky. Then they'll still say, no, it's, whatever the going excuse is, or they just won't answer their phone, and at some point they won't be at NASA headquarters either. They will be gone.
Well,
and that'll be true.
It becomes so blatantly obvious by that time that what more can be said?
Yeah, and that movie 2012, they had a note of reality there where one thing that was real about that movie was that they weren't going to tell the people until the elite escaped, the queen with her little doggies, all that. They got on the ark, and when they were all on the ark and they were safely away, then they would. And meanwhile, California had already crumbled and fallen into the sea and blah, blah. So the statement is we aren't going to tell the public. We're just not going to tell them. We're going to save our sorry behinds, but we're not going to tell them. And that's what the answer is.
What I find so curious is, of course, when you hear these reports, I had posted a report about the underground bunker that supposedly they're building or have built already in underneath the airport in Denver, where supposedly all the elites are going to go when this comes down. Now, I find it really curious because how do they believe that going underground is going to guarantee their survival? And then, if they were to come back up a year from now, what are they going to come back up to? This is what a lot of people are wondering.
Right. Actually, the Zetas say that these people are not really computing. They're so used to shopping and having people wait on them hand and foot and just snapping their fingers and being able to arrange things the way they want, because they're wealthy or politically powerful or whatever, or royalty, whatever, that they can't imagine the reality of what's really going to happen. In the first place, there is going to be hurricane-force winds, magnitude 9 earthquakes everywhere. But the way to survive all of that is to have a small trench like a ravine, and get in there and maybe pull a board over you, a sheet of sheet metal, weigh it down with rocks so the wind can't lift it, and you'll be fine against any flying debris. The wind will go right over you. Nothing will cover you, nothing will fall on you to kill you during the earthquakes. And then go back and get out and see if your house is still standing and pick up from there. But if you go into underground bunkers, that can be a death trap. Can you imagine the elevators not working or the entryway just shut because there was a rock shift? That's likely to happen. So these people are building their own tombs, but they're trying to escape the winds. They're trying to escape the public. They don't want the public banging on their doors. So they open the doors. Let's say this works. They have some sort of a an enclave, and they open the doors, and now they have a bunch of really angry survivors who say, you didn't tell us, you didn't, warn us, and you think you're going to come and say, well, our food has run out now, what have you got for supper? And that won't work at all. They'll be turned on by an enraged survivor community. So what about their militia, their guns, the military that they're going to have? Well, the only reason that hired guns work, and that's what the military is because they've been guaranteed a pension and medical care and they're well paid and all the rest of that stuff. But if you can't guarantee that stuff anymore, why do they have to listen to their old bosses? So Mr. Rich over here hires militia, and the minute the door's shut, the militia says, Mr. Rich can go clean the toilets because I like the way his daughter looks, and where is the liquor bar? And they take over. And this, of course, is the stuff of movies all the time because that's how these people think. Blackwater, these kind of people, are you going to hire them for your security? Good luck. It will last until the door is shut because there's no court system. There's no phones. They can't be called to account, for what they do to their wealthy employers or their politically powerful employers. The federal government isn't going to function. They're going to move to Denver or maybe Kokomo or some other place, and there they will argue amongst themselves and have no influence outside of their immediate room, or as far as they can throw a stone. But governments are going to be functioning only if they can really serve the people, and it'll probably be local governments, and only then if they are effective in managing. Natural leaders will emerge, and those people who got themselves elected by, hot air and strutting around and political connections or whatever the heck, they're not going to be leading. Nobody is going to buy them as leaders. You have to be able to really produce in your leadership so that natural leaders will emerge. There will often be women or even children because children have very open eyes and actually are very resourceful. They don't have fixed thinking the way adults do. So men, say, where's the enemy? And they want to roll up their sleeves, and there is no enemy. Women are used to keeping life going, the food, the laundry, whatever, the household, take care of the sick, and they'll just up and do that, and therefore they will be leading, and that's what's likely to happen. So all this business with a carry-on government, and they're going to emerge and take over, it won't happen, but they think it will.
What do you make of a recent report by NASA once again that states that our magnetic shield, the one that protects the Earth from solar radiation, is rumbling or shaking, and that magnetic reverberations are being detected at ground stations all across the globe? What could be causing these to occur around the globe? NASA says they're unsure of the cause. What is your feeling on that?
At least there's a touch of honesty in that, huh? When you have a large magnetosphere come in, we have magnetic planets. The sun is a big magnetic planet, and it does not flip. It's every 11 years, like NASA said. Their own Ulysses probe showed that. It went by, the North Pole and then the South and then the North or whatever in like late 1990s and said, okay, North is up, South is down. Then year 2000 came and NASA said, oh, the 11-year cycle, it flipped. Now North is down and South is up. And then their probe went by again and said, nope, everything's the same. And they were so ashamed. For a while they sputtered and said maybe it had two south poles, the sun did. And finally they just stripped all that information away and pretended it never happened. But, they're still telling the lie that it flips every 11 years. So stuffed egos there. They're rigid. So what's happening now? Well, the sun is upright, and the Earth and Mercury are also magnetic, and they're pointing in the same direction as the sun. All the planets in the solar system adapt to an even larger influence because our whole solar system is part of a magnetic field of something else yet that is even huger than our solar system. We're just along one of the magnetic field lines of flow, and they've discovered that recently. They're saying it's kind of like a magnetic river waving along just outside the solar system, and the Zetas have always said this. So what happens when Planet X comes toward us? Well, magnets like to either go end to end, so that my North Pole is at your South Pole, right? And end to end, they snap in a line like that if you let these little magnets do that. Or side by side, they'll do that. They'll all line up side by side, but they don't like to be, every which way. The smaller magnets are encouraged to go either end to end or side by side, and I think there's even an opposition where, anything coming out of my North Pole immediately goes to your South Pole and vice versa. So it's like they're lying side by side, but your feet are in my face and my feet are in your face, that type of thing. So and this is happening to the Earth. The Earth is twisting all over the place, trying to get comfortable for years since Planet X came into the solar system. Early 2004, we detected an Earth wobble, which forms a figure 8 if you're looking down on the North Pole. And I was able to compute this by collecting data from people all over the world. Where is your sun rising? What's the azimuth? That's the 360 around. Time and date, place, all that. And was able to compute how the wobble is happening, and it was always this figure 8. And that's continued up until this last month, July, in which it's a figure 8 plus more stuff. And it's all in an attempt when the North Pole, which is not quite at our geographic North Pole, it's off center a bit, comes around the horizon so that it's facing the sun and Planet X, which is coming at us from the direction of the sun, then it gets a shove. And it's shoved away. And then after it escapes around the horizon again, it can bounce back. So it's like shove, bounce every day. And people were able to record this. We had somebody in the Ukraine that caught Jupiter at night, on film, and they said in 20 minutes it moved from this position to that position, marking the photograph, right? Overlaid photographs, kind of like long exposure. And it was astonishing. There's no way it could move that distance except that that's an Earth wobble. And people have reported laying on their backs and watching the moon, and in a very clear night, and seeing the moon, actually move in that similar manner where it either stays in place too long or moves in the wrong direction or moves too far. So the Earth wobble is very detectable if you bother to look and take measurements and not just trust and say something, like, oh, the sun is rising and setting every day. Everything's normal, because it's not. So it's all attempting to deal with this intense magnetic field which keeps crowding closer and crowding closer. It's a conflict between what the sun is telling the Earth to do, which is stand up straight, and the way I am standing, my north is your north. It's a conflict between that and the approaching Planet X, which keeps telling it to do flip, 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 try to come into some other arrangement to accommodate Planet X. And meanwhile, all these planets are kind of dithering. We have Venus kind of trapped, along with the Earth in front of Planet X, and the Earth's dark twin, which is normally opposite the sun from the Earth, so we never see it. It came around in early 2004. We got photos of it. And it's coming up behind Planet X, behind the Earth in its same orbit, and it's stuck there, and we've got some photos of that. And all of these 4 planets, which are like sisters, dark twin Earth and Venus are the same size of each other, are stuck in front of Planet X, which is coming closer and closer. And meanwhile, they're all kind of bouncing off each other as though you are in an elevator and shaking and bing-bonging off each other. So it's not real static, and it changes, but it sure is causing earthquakes.
With the state of our economy today, and of course all the many problems that face us here in this country, it seems like the idea of catastrophic solar flares is not something that's on the minds of a lot of people these days. In fact, I wonder exactly how many people are paying any attention to these warnings that are coming from NASA. And then we got to wonder why even bother to say anything to the media or to the general public about this, what they're referring to as a once-in-a-generation event. We understand why they're saying it, but what's the idea of telling it to the general public, because the public's so concerned with other things, they're not really paying attention to what's going on.
Well, they're losing their credibility. They're crying wolf. That story of the boy that cried wolf too often, and then when the wolf really came, nobody listened to him. Yeah, and that's what they're doing, because now they lose their credibility, and someone says, NASA is warning, and everybody says, because, it never happens. It doesn't happen in step. So what are they going to do? Have continuous alerts, like any minute?
Well, that's what I mean. It's going to come to the point, Nancy, where they're going to say, oh, it's another warning from NASA, so what, But then maybe in this future event that's going to take place, it's really going to be something that they should be worried about, but they're going to say, oh, I'm not worried.
Right, that's true, except that the Earth changes. There's an anxiety level rising within the general public. And people have mentioned, the irritability, distractibility. People are getting sick an awful lot. You go through McDonald's, you order a chicken sandwich, and you get a hot dog, and you don't even bother to complain because it might get worse. People are distracted, and they know something's wrong. They sense they're being lied to. The other day, about a month ago, the sun came up almost an hour early where I am. I was stunned. I said, oh boy, it's so far north and it's awfully early. And I checked in, and it was 5:15, and it wasn't supposed to even rise until 5:45, and it was up, up above the hill and my neighbor's roofs, so I could see it. So, and then went right back the next day to not being there. If you're a citizen and you see something like that, you have an uneasy feeling that something's going on.
Has this phenomenon been occurring in other places besides your locale?
Oh, sure. Yeah. There's other people report this kind of stuff. We track, the Earth wobble and the like, and it's reported on email, just floods of reports. So the moon is very erratic. It's supposed to be 5 degrees off the ecliptic at any given time. It's way north between new and full, and way south between full and new. And people, and it's so far south, I think it's a street light on the street. Sounds to me, and it's supposed to be like overhead. So it's and people, little old ladies will say, "Oh, I've lived in this house all my life, and let me tell you, the moon never shone in that window. Never, This kind of observation is being done. Then there's the weather. The weather is so extreme, and they tried to blame global warming, and then global warming was proven to be a hoax, and more dirt is coming out about that, about how they played with the data, cherry-picked the data, and the like, and it's not true. Although there is heating from the core of the Earth up, this is not man-made. If the rock is warmer down lower than it is up higher toward the surface, well, how can that happen, if the heat is drilling down? So it's not global warming, so they can't blame that, but the weather is just wild. Droughts and deluge and intractable and switching about and vertical jet streams instead of horizontal jet streams, and people know something is wrong.
Of course, we always get a logical explanation from the media and from meteorologists and weather people about why these events are taking place.
Yeah, but after a while, when there's so many facets, it's where the sun and the moon and the constellations are, what's happening with the weather, and there's crop failures, so the economy is bad, and food shortages are starting to show up mostly with empty shelves, and the prices have gone up, but there's a lot of price controlling going on behind the scenes so that the public does not panic. Starvation is increasing around the world. You just ask the UN. They've been reporting it for a few years already. And they know that something is not right, but it's too multifaceted. It's not just that the compass is wacky, or that the electronics go wacky every now and then, but it's the constellations, the sun and the moon and the weather, and the general feeling, that they're being lied to, that they're not being told the truth. There's a perception in the public that government is lying to them just because it is not addressing the weather extremes and what they're seeing. If someone were to say in the media, if they had said this all along, the Earth has developed a wobble and we don't know why, but we're looking into it, then people would say, oh, it's not a cover-up. They're looking into it, right? Or if, something like that. But they don't. They say, chirp, chirp, and talk about who's getting married or divorced and like that, and they never address the fact that the moon is cockamamie off its orbit. So why wouldn't you? Why would you have astronomers like NASA come out and say, blah, 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 and not have them talk about why the moon is not in the right place? So for those people that see something like that, they know they're being lied to. They are certain of that. That makes them uneasy. So whether NASA says, oh, this or that, now the fact that the NASA issues warnings and nothing happens only adds to their distrust. There's a very deep distrust of government.
I guess the greatest tragedy in all of this is the fact that there is this distraction. People are going about their daily lives, have no idea that anything is happening other than what they would consider to be the norm or what's being reported as the norm by the media. And yet there's all these strange and unusual things going on that people just simply aren't aware of, either aren't aware of or probably don't care. So that's the great tragedy right there.
It is a tragedy, but contactees are on the increase. Those that sense something is wrong are giving what the Zetas call is termed the call, a request for counseling. And this amounts to you get a visit from aliens. And, of course, you can decline at any point, because it's in your hands. You gave the call. You can decline. But they start to chat with aliens, and they get the truth. They pick up all the vibes. The vibes are good. They know they're being told the truth. And they listen, and they're told what else to look for, and they look into that, and they say, holy cow. They're told how to bump into each other. Go to this bookstore at such and such a time in the morning, Saturday morning, and you'll find the, blah, 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 and then they bump into each other and make friends. And contactees are on the increase worldwide. Group meetings are occurring on spaceships, or they're all taken to some big barn somewhere and have a big meeting, and they know each other. Then when they bump into each other in normal society, they have this feeling that they know the person from somewhere, and they just get along with them right from the start, so that future survival communities are already being formed by this means where you meet people. And this is what people are doing with their anxiety, because they know they can't trust the media. They are reaching out and, in essence, seeking information from elsewhere, and they're getting it from the visitors.
Okay, we're going to take a short break here, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about these extraordinary Earth and climate events that Nancy and I have been talking about that are happening now and are continuing to happen, and what we're going to find out, or try to find out if we can, what could be causing these great disasters. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back.